Nigel Farage is one of the best-known anti-establishment politicians we have in Europe today. In Sweden, we know him as the former leader of the UKIP party, who played an essential role in getting the United Kingdom out of the European Union. And now we have the great pleasure to have Nigel Farage with us here on Riks. Welcome, Nigel.
Thank you. It's very good to be here. And it's good to know that in Sweden there are voices of opposition. But if I was to follow mainstream Swedish media, whether it's television or newspapers, I would think everybody agreed that everything was wonderful. So I'm very pleased. And by the way, I don't think there's a single mainstream media across the whole of Europe or the free world that has the level of censorship that you have in Sweden.
Oh, could be. But let's talk about Britain now. It's been today over 2 years since the UK left the European Union. Are you seeing any of the positive results that you had hoped for, or is it just too early to say?
Oh, no. I mean, we used to be a cloudy mid-Atlantic island. Now the sun shines absolutely every day. No, I don't mean that. I think where we've seen the biggest benefit of Brexit is in terms of Britain's standing in the world. Whether it comes to dealing with Ukraine and taking a position, there's no doubt the Brits have been very, very dominant in that, in a way that couldn't have happened as members of the European Union. The vaccine rollout, the whole of the European Union fighting, bitching, arguing with each other. Some utterly useless woman from Cyprus who was supposed to be in control of vaccine procurement for all 27 nations. In the end, they all decided that she was unelected and useless and all went in their own directions. We actually got on with it ourselves and had a much more rapid vaccine rollout than any other country in the European Union. That's a second good example. A third good example would be we're able to replicate and add to the existing global free trade agreements that we had as members of the European Union. This mythological idea that you have to be part of a big bloc to negotiate trade deals, what utter rot. Singapore, South Korea, Switzerland, these countries have trade deals with a much greater GDP on the other side than the European Union has ever managed to attain. So they're three absolutely concrete examples of what's gone well in the last 2 years. There are things that haven't gone well, but that's the fault of our government and not anybody else. I always said the point about Brexit, the point about being independent, the point about being free is you are in charge of your own destiny. Now, you can make good decisions, you can make bad decisions, and I don't think we've quite, in terms of European regulation, rolled back enough to allow men and women running small companies to realize their full potential. And border controls, which was a major issue for Brexit voters, thus far, the government has failed us. And the reason for that, and it's interesting, is it wasn't a full Brexit because we stayed part of the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, why we, a country that have had Magna Carta since 1215, have had one of the least corrupt judiciaries, one of the freest systems, our rights of trial by jury, we've never been a police state, all of those things, quite why we are still signed up to a code of conduct decided by people who are called jurists, not judges, jurists who are overpaid and meet in Strasbourg is beyond me. So there is more work to do, but basically, if you ask me 2 years on, how is Brexit going? Well, 2/3 of it's going very well. 1/3 of it, like my old school reports would say, could do better. But we're in the right direction. And the most important thing, it's now irreversible.
Okay.
It's done. It's accepted by the British people. There's no going back.
From what you said in the beginning, it sounds as if there is a new energy, a new optimism in Britain.
There's a new self-confidence on the world stage. That's what it is. Okay. And you can't put a measure on that. You know, I can put a measure on vaccines. I can put a measure on trade deals. I can do those things numerically. You can never, ever put a number on what self-confidence is. But there is no doubt there is a new self-confidence and absolutely no doubt that the rest of the world now looks at the UK differently to when we were part of the European Union.
In Sweden, I would say that there is no discussion today about leaving the Union, but rather on not giving more power or more money away to the European Union. What would it take, according to you, for this organization to develop in a direction where more independence is given to the member states and less power to the central organization? Is it even possible to see such a future?
It'll never happen in a month of Sundays. All you have to do is to go back to the 1957 Treaty of Rome and read the small print. The whole thing was always designed to be about ever closer union. And of course, the Ukraine crisis is now being used by many in Brussels to go for a full EU foreign policy without any rights of national veto. They want full militarization of the Union. And even if it takes them a long time to get there, that's their stated objective. That is what they want to do. They will stop at nothing. And, you know, 30 years ago, just before Sweden joined, the Treaty of Maastricht, they threw in this word, subsidiarity. There will be subsidiarity. And what subsidiarity meant was that Brussels might, if you're a good boy, give you back a bit of self-autonomy. Hey, look, you guys invented it. It's called Stockholm Syndrome. Sweden is now in Stockholm Syndrome. Oh, yeah. You think that if you're polite to the prison guard, you might get an extra piece of toast for breakfast tomorrow morning, but you're still in the prison. And quite why we don't have Swedish politicians or others with the courage to say Sweden should leave, Sweden should be independent, Sweden should maintain its historic position of neutrality, you know, something that actually was a key marker of what Sweden was and how people understood Sweden to be across the world. And the reason is people in politics, so, you know, do an opinion poll now in Sweden, ask how many want to leave the European Union, you'll get a relatively low number. So politicians think, it's unpopular, so I can't say it. But leadership, political leadership, is about taking arguments that might be a minority before you open your mouth, and through force of argument and logic and passion and that combination of head and heart, convincing more people to join the cause, more people to join the crusade. And, you know, and I'll tell you this for nothing. You know, when I first started doing this, we're going back nearly 30 years. When I first started touring town halls all over small town rural England with very small audiences, I mean, I have to tell you, you know, I was sort of the priest without a church, you know, in those days. But it was by force of argument. It was by explaining to the British people we'd made an historic mistake, just as Sweden has made an historic mistake, that people began to gather around me. Until in the end, what we built was what I called the People's Army. Peaceful, non-violent at all times, but an army in terms of the fact we were marching in step against the entirety of the media, the entirety of the political class, in our conviction that historically we'd always been a free, independent island, self-governing island, with links and trade and connections all over the English-speaking world. And that what had been done by cowardly, self-serving politicians and big global businessmen and women who cared nothing for our country, for its people, for their workers, for their conditions, but purely for their own bottom line profit, was a mistake. And that passion, that argument built that army that forced the referendum. And don't tell me Don't tell me that that's impossible in a country like Sweden. You've got your own very unique identity, position and placement. And now you're in a European Union. You are close to being part, I think, of a foreign policy which could be aggressive in the years to come, and you will have no means, no veto to stop it. And you're even looking at joining NATO. Well, what is Sweden? If Sweden drops its neutrality, becomes part of NATO, becomes part of an EU foreign policy, what is the point of your country?
Let's go to another subject concerning this matter. What's the point of our countries? And it's also a subject where you have engaged this passion that you're talking about. Because in recent years, you have had a lot of illegal migrants trying to reach the UK by boat from France across the Channel. And you are one of those who have tried to draw public attention to this problem. And we don't hear much about this in Sweden. Could you just give us an update from your perspective? Is this still going on, and what can be done about it?
So people crossing the English Channel illegally in inflatable dinghies is very visual. Firstly, it's very visual. Secondly, of course, as an island, we find it deeply offensive because protecting ourselves against invasion has for thousands of years been part of who we are, part of our folklore. But, and it's wrong, and they're 90% young men coming from all over the world. And you know what they do? They destroy their ID documents, their passports, etc. They throw their mobile phones into the English Channel so that nobody can ever trace who they are. And one of the arguments that I've used is, and it's not been as visual in Sweden, but one of the arguments I used is look at what has happened to Malmö. Look at what happens if you take very large numbers of undocumented young males who come from cultures in which women aren't even second-class citizens, and that's just one little area. So I use Malmö repeatedly as an example of what not to do. I mean, the change in that city, the change in Malmö, since I knew it, you know, back in the 1980s, when I was involved in shipping metals and commodities around the world, Malmö was a port that I knew, and I did business there. And to go back and see it today, it's just extraordinary. And of course, if a Swede makes that argument, or a Brit makes that argument in their own countries, we're told it's racist. But it isn't racist. This isn't about race, but it is about culture. It genuinely is about culture. I mean, we are, your country and mine, we are relatively, in the old sense of the word, liberal countries. We couldn't really care less about people's sexuality, or, you know, we don't care. Be who you are, obey the law, be true to yourself. That's how we live. We respect the fact that women are equal partners in our society. Now, those that went before us 100 years ago didn't, but that's been an evolution, and we've got genuine equality. And it's amazing, isn't it? We're actually allowing new cultures to form too quickly because there are too many people to assimilate, that frankly, as I've said already, don't regard women as second-class citizens. And well, their attitude towards homosexuals, I don't even need to repeat on your program because everyone knows what I'm talking about. We are importing intolerance. We are importing division. So yes, we have a problem. It's still going on, but in percentage terms, our problem is much less than the problem that your political class has put upon Sweden.
Yes.
But you have got a bigger problem than we've got. And I'm not saying that through any sense of boastfulness because we're fast catching you up. But these are real issues. So I think those on the conservative, small c conservative side of this debate need to start talking a bit more about culture.
Yes, I was just going to ask you about the general view on immigration amongst conservatives in Britain. In the Tory party, for example, is Britain still viewed upon as a country where everybody can come and become British, more or less, or is that changing?
Well, look, I think, you know, after World War II, you know, we had a massive contribution from the Empire, stroke Commonwealth, a massive contribution. 40% of all of our efforts in the world wars came from the colonies. And it was recognized in 1945 that we owed the most terrific debt to these people. And thus began a policy of Commonwealth immigration. But you know, from 1950 until 2000, the net inflow into the country was between 30 and 40,000 people a year. Now, in a population of 55 million, you can deal with that. You can live with that. Since Tony Blair came to power 25 years ago this week, the British population has increased by 10 million. 10 million. And 84% of that is because of legal, not crossing the channel in boats, but legal immigration. So we've willfully chosen to do this. And I think the argument is that for the 50 or 60 years after World War II, immigration wasn't even a political issue. When I was first elected to the European Parliament, the word immigration did not appear on my election literature. It was a comfortable, settled issue. 30,000 people a year net into a population of 55 million, you can easily assimilate people, right? But you turn that into hundreds of thousands of people, let alone vast numbers of people coming from cultures where Christianity or Christian culture is looked down upon, condemned, women's rights, the other things we've discussed so far in our conversation. And you will not have assimilation, you will have separation and division, and with that, conflict. And you know, I've argued for years that multiculturalism is a mistake. And that's not to be confused with multiracialism. Multiculturalism, the deliberate attempt by government to promote different cultures, whereas to say we're all part of the same thing. And I'm frankly sick to death of this so-called human rights agenda. This group has rights. That group has rights. This group deserves special privileges. The hell with it. We must treat everybody as equal. Everybody is equal, regardless of their gender, race, class, self-definition. I don't care. You have to treat everybody equally. And fairness in society is to try as much as you can to give people opportunity, equality of opportunity. You can't guarantee equality of outcome. And these are some of the great mistakes that we're making. And we're beating ourselves up. We, particularly in this country, we're beating ourselves up. You know, oh, we're dreadful, we're horrible, we had a slave trade, we're racist, we're ghastly, we're beastly, we're awful. Well, I tell you what, compare us to the rest of the world, where slavery is still in place. Compare us to other continents where, you know, Sikhs and Muslims hate each other in a way that would be unthinkable to you and me.
Yeah.
And this is all the updated modern Marxist agenda. It's to make us hate our countries, to hate who we are, to disrespect the concept of a family unit. I mean, this is the real enemy. Yes, Putin's a problem. Yes, China is potentially an even bigger problem, perhaps. But the real cancer, the real problem is within our societies, within our education systems, where we're teaching younger generations to hate everything that our forefathers built and mothers built and developed over centuries.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that later on. But when you talk about numbers, quantities, how many people that come into Europe and into Britain, isn't the problem with the left establishment society that they have never wanted to think in terms of proportions? No, it's reasonable to have some immigration, but not too much.
Yeah, because for them it's all about values.
Oh, yeah.
They believe that their values are superior, and therefore, if your values are superior, why look at the facts? You know, it's real sort of head in the clouds stuff. It's not based on any. Well, number one, not based on pragmatism, and number two, based on understanding human nature.
No. And then the subject that you already touched, because we have today a liberal establishment and a woke culture in popular culture and in schools, as you said, who is becoming more and more intolerant when it comes to expressing pride or gratefulness towards our own history, our own Western identity. And you already mentioned Marxism here, but my question was actually, what do you see as being the source or the motivation for this self-destructive madness?
Yeah, I'm sorry for running ahead of it.
It's okay.
It's the virus. The virus is the problem. No, not coronavirus, Marxism. And it rears its head once every 20 or 30 years or so and becomes very attractive to lots of young people until it becomes successful and it wipes away the existing establishment, re-establishes its own new order, and then kills millions of its own people. I mean, this is the pattern that we've seen with Marxist communist thinking all over the world. No, it's the old virus that is back. And, you know, in a world where inequalities, in the Western world, where inequalities have got greater, I can understand why it's tempting for many young people to be attracted to it. The problem is it just doesn't work. And there's a problem here in that those of us on the more conservative side of the debate become too shy. You know, we should be telling kids, excel at what you're best at. You know, if you're not talented academically, go and learn a trade, go and learn a skill. Don't be ashamed of that, be proud of that. We don't need to import people from all over the world to do a job that could be done by people in our own country. We're scared of elitism. We're scared of telling our kids, strive to be the best. We're scared of telling people, do you know the best route to success? Work hard.
Yeah. Work
hard. Oh, you can't say that. People must work a maximum 35 hours a week and have psychological days off and rest break. No, that isn't how the world works. You know, I mean, the pandemic has pushed a work from home culture. Oh, people are so much more productive working from home, darling. No, they're not, because the doorbell rings or the dog's not feeling very well. Or, you know, I mean, actually, people, human beings being together in offices, in social interaction, in bars or restaurants, human beings being together, that's where ideas bounce back and forth. That's where young people learn from older people about experience of life and doing things. And I think we've actually got to be, you know, frankly, China's laughing at us. Singapore's laughing at us. They are educating their kids, encouraging their kids to be the best they can. And we in the West are mollycoddling our kids and telling them it's all about values and being happy. Well, fine, great, magnificent, but you know what? The engine room of all civilizations that do well, are tolerant, and look after their people is economic growth and success. And we need to get back, I think, to a bit more straightforward talk on that.
And finally, what is actually your vision, Nigel, for the nations and the peoples of the Western world in, let's say, 20 or 50 years' time? What changes?
We are engaged, we are engaged in a superhuman battle now. And the battle is to save Western civilization. It's to save the Judeo-Christian culture that underpins everything. Everything. I mean, you know, the Ten Commandments actually are pretty important. And by the way, I'm not a God botherer, but I'm saying those principles underpin everything we're about, everything we're built. Respect for the family, an understanding that the nation state, it's the unit we feel part of, we have an emotional attachment to, and that actually civilized nation states run on democratic lines will never go to war with each other. Challenge anybody in the future. Name a war between two mature, functioning democracies. And you know what? No one can. So we're engaged in a great struggle.
And are you optimistic? Do you feel any optimism today?
Look, I tell you what, I think in the end, good triumphs over evil. It may sometimes take a long while to get there, but I still think, despite our capital cities, despite the poisoning of the minds of too many of our young people, I still think the middle of our countries, ordinary folk, do not want everything about their identity trashed and destroyed and thrown into some kind of crazy Marxist melting pot. No, this battle for Western civilization is winnable. But you know something? I thought for 20 years I might become known as the patron saint of lost causes, as I fought to free us from the European Union. But if I manage to do it, I'm sure the West can save itself.
Okay. Nigel Farage, thank you so very much for this inspiring conversation and for accepting to talk to us today. And thank you everyone for watching Riks.